Tell us about your work on Head Start.
That's interesting and in some ways amusing and certainly a very successful one. I think it was shortly after New Year in 1965 that Joe Califano, who was Lyndon Johnson's either chief of staff or chief domestic advisor, called. And he said that the president wants to do a little experiment in early childhood education, and we understand you know something about it. Would you come down and help us organize such a program? So Ed Ziegler, Yuri Bronfenbrenner, Julius Richmond, and Robert Cook, I think it was, who was a pediatrician down at Hopkins, were in the group of us who were invited to the Oval Office. And Lyndon said that he wanted to do something about poverty, and he was convinced that we had to start early. And he had been reading about intervening early with preschool. Could we run an experiment to see if there's anything to this idea? And he said, I think we could find money to support maybe as many as 25,000 kids, which of course we were very excited about, one of the biggest experiments any of us had ever heard of, right? And we left to plan it. And about a week later, Joe called and he said, you know, the president has rethought this, and he wants this if you can make that 50,000 kids.
Wow.
And about a month later, he wanted it to be 100,000. Well, by July, he had asked that we try to do 500,000. Well, we managed to mount by July with a very crash program, a program that served about 450,000 kids.
Wow.
Now, that first year was very varied in its quality, and all kinds of things were passing for Head Start, for early schooling. But if it did nothing else, it succeeded in getting the country committed to earlier education, beginning education earlier for kids. Because at that time, I suspect less than a third of the states in the country required that local districts provide education for kids before 6 years of age. And within 4 years after we started, all 50 states were requiring that education be provided early. And of course, the data on its effectiveness were quite mixed. I was speaking about the humor in it. I think it was in July, no, it must have been August or September of 65. Lyndon had a press conference in the Rose Garden announcing the success of Head Start. I, being the research director for Head Start, was not at the party because I was back in my office simply trying to organize the data. We were overwhelmed with all of this data and hadn't even begun to do any analysis to justify his conclusion. But he was making the political statement, oh, this is successful, we're going to double it. I also missed that party out of protest. By the fall of 65, I had realized how serious a mistake the president had made in expanding the war in Vietnam. And Susan and I felt there was no way I could be his guest at the Rose Garden. So, but yes,
that's quite an impact.
It's an interesting experience, and I guess one of the things I'm proudest of, because it clearly is one of the nation's most important experiments in education.
What do you think about where it is today?
disappointed that it is not further along, disappointed that it is not of greater quality, and most disappointed that we still have not found a way to reach the kids most in need. The hard-to-reach kids were a problem for us in '65, and they continue to be.
No problem today.
And I don't know what a democracy can do about that. I gave a rather radical talk one day when I said that if we could, at that time we was conscripting people for military service. I took the position that if we could conscript adolescents and young adults for military service, maybe we should conscript younger kids for their own development. And if I felt we could trust the politics of government more, I think I would push that one even farther. But since I am not completely comfortable that we can always trust government to do what is best for people, I have real reservations about giving government the authority to take people's children to educate them. But we do intervene in people's lives for physical health purposes. And it may be that we're going to have to find ways to intervene for education purposes.
Tell us about your work on school desegregation.
I was only marginally involved in that, although I testified a good bit. My closest involvement, I guess, occurred shortly after I got to this country, but not this country, shortly after I came to New York. I was still a student at Columbia when Goodman Watson called me, invited me into his office one day to say that he had a friend over at City College who was trying to review the literature on the effects of segregation on the development of children. And would I be interested in helping? And I agreed, and of course his friend was Kenneth Clark. And the document that I helped Ken and Mamie prepare was the brief that he and several other social scientists provided to the Supreme Court that was the basis for the 54 decision. I had no idea when I was chasing down articles in the library and writing abstracts that it would end up that way. But I was rather proud to have had that very modest involvement. The other involvements were much more in court cases where I was invited in as an expert witness. I was not among the people who were courageous enough to go down into Alabama and Mississippi and protest and stuff. I think I was only down in Mississippi once. And I would like to say that the opportunity didn't present itself again, but I really think that I probably avoided it. I, by that time, was beginning to have a family and a young wife, and I think I was just scared to go down and do that.
Along with your wife and your 4 children, you founded the CEJJES Institute.
The CEJJES Institute.
CEJJES Institute.
Right.
What is that?
Well, the name is made up of the first letters of the names of our family. My second son is Christopher, C. My first son is Edmund, E. My first daughter is Jessica, and my second daughter is Johanna. I am Edmund, and Susan is S, the fifth six-member of our family.
Okay.
But the CEJJES Institute is right next door. Our youngest daughter used to live there. When she moved to California, she and her siblings bought the property from her and gave it to their mother and me, and suggested that we use it to do something for the community to kind of commemorate our lives of service here. So the CEJJES Institute is a conference center, it's a cultural center, it is a art gallery. My books and archives are there, so it's a library. But it's a kind of cultural center for people of the African diaspora in Rockland County. Charles White, the artist who did this piece and the piece over here, in fact, most of the work in this house, was my fictive brother. We've got the largest collection of his work, and there's a gallery dedicated to him there.
That's great. You have been named one of America's most prolific and thoughtful scholars. You are the author of more than 200 articles and 18 books. Columbia University named its campus in Harlem, New York, the Edmund Gordon Campus of Teachers College, Columbia. You are an elected fellow of various prestigious associations, including the American Psychological Association, American Society of Psychological Science, the American Association for Orthopsychiatry, and fellow in the American Association for the Advancement of Science. In 1968, you were elected member of the National Academy of Education. In 2010, you just received the AERA Relating Research to Practice Award. What haven't you accomplished that you would still like to accomplish today?
I think I've done enough. I've done my part. I don't have any pressing aspirations. Since it looks like I'm still alive and will be for a while.
You're good with that.
I want to continue to be useful, but until the idea of the Commission on Assessment and Education came up, I didn't have an immediate goal. If that materializes, I certainly would like to do that as well as I've done other things. I would dearly love to be able to change the national policy with respect to education to get a more equal focus on out-of-school and in-school learning.
And you term that compensatory versus supplementary, right? Is that how you juxtapose?
I guess I'm talking about supplementary versus compensatory.
Okay.
Now I've got to think about that. I wrote the book on compensatory education, what, 30 years ago. I wrote the book on supplementary education just 10 years ago. So in a sense, supplementary education supplants compensatory education. I think education still needs to be compensatory for people who have not had as many opportunities and as rich opportunities to learn as other folk have. But I think education in general for privileged and underprivileged people needs a strong supplementary or comprehensive element to it, because both of those terms simply mean that there's much more to education and its facilitation than is covered by classroom instruction. I've got a recent paper. The title is something like "Education is not coterminous with schooling." It, begins actually, we know now, before conception, and is certainly influenced by things that happen during the fetal stages and in the postnatal stage and in the early childhood stage and throughout life. So that I think I would talk about complementary and supplementary.